What kind of Ferrari did we see in Bahrain? What did the 3 days of testing at the 5.412-kilometer Bahrain International Circuit in Sakhir in preparation for the 2025 Formula One World Championship debut in Melbourne for the Australian Grand Prix in 2 weeks reveal? Is the SF-25 a car with which the prancing horse can aim for both world championships? At the moment, there is no clear answer, as the testing in Sakhir took place under unusual environmental conditions, with cool temperatures, sudden gusts of wind, and even some rain showers. But beyond the weather conditions, some evaluations of the red car can be made. In absolute terms, the SF-25 single-seater is not the most competitive car at this moment. The McLaren, reigning Constructors Champion, has pushed the limits with certain concepts on the MCL39, keeping the papaya-colored car a step ahead of the competition. And if in Abu Dhabi, the last Grand Prix of the 2024 Formula One season, Ferrari was very close to McLaren, as technical director Leclerc spoke of a gap of 70 milliseconds per lap, there is now a feeling that the gap has unfortunately widened, with the Maranello team seemingly absorbed by its main pursuers, Red Bull and Mercedes. The absolute performance is not what matters most, even though former Maranello driver Carlos Sainz stood out with Williams. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc finished second and third respectively, right behind the Spaniard, but it is clear that almost everyone was holding back. Mercedes, for instance, reportedly used engine mappings that sacrificed at least 15 horsepower. In short, no one wanted to reveal their true potential, Ferrari included. Simulations suggest that if the first Grand Prix were held in Sakhir, a pole time below 1 minute 28 seconds would not be unrealistic, meaning it would be more than 1.3 seconds faster than Carlos Sainz's reference time in the pre-season testing session this week. Therefore, attention should be on long runs and race distances. The first notable finding is that Ferrari has improved in limiting the wear of the new Pirelli tires. However, the real question is why the red car is showing an unexpected difficulty in corner entry. The tense expression on Charles Leclerc's face at the end of testing speaks louder than words. While Lewis Hamilton radiates positivity, the Monegasque appears more cautious. Charles Leclerc indicated that he would wait a bit longer before making a judgment, explaining that the Maranello team was working hard to improve the balance after struggling over the past 2 days. The Ferrari driver added that they would see how things unfolded at the Albert Park circuit in Melbourne in the first round of the 2025 Formula One season. The SF-25 is not yet fully sorted, most likely just behind schedule in its preparation. However, Charles Leclerc feels limited because the car cannot carry the braking phase all the way into the corner entry, undermining one of his key strengths, braking. This week, an important simulator session is scheduled to analyze the problems and identify solutions. 2 key aspects need to be understood. Are the difficulties arising from an imperfect fine-tuning of the pull rod suspension, the system Ferrari copied from McLaren and Red Bull? Or is the SF-25 unbalanced in certain situations due to a shift in mass distribution, with more weight moved towards the rear? This is no minor issue. The red car lacks drivability. It is highly plausible that it arrived in Bahrain underprepared and that the most effective setup for the pull rod suspension has yet to be found. If this is the case, a solution will eventually be reached, even if it takes some time, and some issues may naturally fade away as temperatures become more representative of those found during the Formula One season. When changing a suspension design, it is necessary to recalibrate the right parameters, and among the top teams, Ferrari is the only one that has completely redesigned its car. These initial difficulties were, therefore, somewhat expected. If, on the other hand, the issues stem from the overall layout, the situation would be more serious, as making major adjustments once the season has begun would be very complicated. However, no one seems overly concerned about Lewis Hamilton's early stop at the end of yesterday's session, namely the hydraulic issue in the transmission is better encountered during testing. The gearbox is a new design which is shorter, but its internal system remains the same, suggesting this was an isolated incident without further consequences. There is no sense of discouragement within the team, which suggests that the SF-25 single-seater has a solid foundation and simply requires further work. Concerns arose on Thursday when Lando Norris was lapping a full second faster in long runs, but adjustments made in the right direction halved the gap in just 1 day. This indicates that Ferrari responds well to setup changes. At most, it could be a car that struggles more in cold conditions, unlike McLaren, which thrives in critical conditions. Not surprisingly, McLaren remains the most universal car on the grid. So much of the anticipation ahead of this new Formula One season has been centered around Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari, and that hype certainly showed no signs of abating at testing. We had already seen the iconic first pictures of him in Maranello. We had seen the runs in old cars, and we had heard his first thoughts on what early life at Formula One's most famous team was like. But it was this week which was always going to provide early answers to one of the biggest questions. Just how was he going to get on with his first Ferrari car? A handful of off-track moments during the first morning made it a slightly scrappy beginning in Bahrain for Lewis Hamilton, but he set the second quickest time of his second outing and afterwards said he was really enjoying the SF-25 and slowly bonding with it. At the same time, the British driver has also repeatedly stressed that, just 6 weeks into his big new career adventure, he still has much to learn about not only Ferrari's new car, but their settings and working practices. Indeed, having to absorb so much new information, he describes every day at Ferrari so far as being one of significance. In that same Friday lunchtime press conference, he spoke with enthusiasm about completing his first race simulation for the team when he took to the track. However, in perhaps the first setback to his preparations, that never quite materialized with his afternoon running, featuring only 47 laps and Ferrari finishing the test slightly early behind the screens in their garage. What consequence, if any, that late loss of long running will have for Hamilton and Ferrari heading to the first truly big moment of their relationship in Melbourne remains to be seen. The headlines at testing are often generated by the fastest times, but the most telling information is often hidden elsewhere. Across the 3 days, there was one run in particular that caught the eye of those studying the lap-by-lap data, and it belonged to McLaren's Lando Norris. On Thursday afternoon, he put together a race simulation that has convinced the paddock the reigning Constructors Champions are still the team to beat going into the new season. When a driver completes over 50 laps without being wheeled into the garage, you know they have started their run with a full tank of fuel, or nearly a full tank. Therefore, you can make clear comparisons between drivers if they conduct race simulations because you know the fuel levels are similar. By only looking at one-lap pace in F1 testing, you don't know how much fuel is in the car, so it is not always the best indicator of a car's pace. Going into testing, the two teams expected to pose the greatest threat to the defense of their constructors' crown were Ferrari and Red Bull. Ferrari had their moments, and while they didn't show anything comparable to Lando Norris's race simulation before Hamilton's Friday afternoon's issues, there still seemed to be plenty of positivity emanating from the Italian team's camp. For Red Bull, who were so strong at testing in 2023 and 2024 that most had given Max Verstappen the title before the opening race, their 2025 experience was a marked contrast. While every single driver struggled with handling issues at times, particularly in the blustery conditions, the Red Bull was notably tricky. Both Verstappen and Liam Lawson had spins, but more importantly, regularly struggled to keep control of the RB21. Verstappen showed some pace on Friday evening but was edged by Mercedes Russell, which even factoring in the possibility of different engine settings and fuel levels would have been unthinkable in the last couple of years.